Hey everyone, it's Colby, and I've got a little project to tell you about. So I stream on Twitch, and one of the ways to engage your community and also produce some low-effort content at the same time is to ask your community for suggestions of things to watch. There are a few popular ways to do this. You can have them donate money in order to submit a link. You can have them post videos to a subreddit. You can have them spam the chat. All of these are not really good for a number of reasons. Now, I'm not big time enough to be asking people to donate money in order to make me watch clips of a man dry aging steak in peanut butter. I'd like to keep my chat clean and free of spam, and I feel like subreddits have the problem in which if I were to do this more than once, I would have to sift through the submissions from last time as well, and how do you tell when a thing was submitted really easily? It's a whole mess. Also, I'm a software engineer, and I just, like, rebuilding the wheel is just kind of a thing we do, so let's do it. I've built over a dozen REST APIs at this point in my life, so I'm not really worried about the back end. The only tricky part is I want to limit it to where every person in the community gets just one recommendation, and per recommendation, they can only +1 a thing one time. Which unfortunately means that I now have to authenticate users. Listen, authentication can be spooky. I've worked with OAuth 2 before, and every time I've done it, it's never been fun. It's my least favorite part of the project literally every time. So I went looking for a better solution, and I ended up finding Stytch. So Stytch is an authentication platform aimed at developers that, with the idea, bless their hearts, that authenticating should be easier. And sure enough, they've got a bunch of different offerings for you. So they do OAuth integration with Google and Microsoft, so you just have to integrate with Stytch, and then they will do all of that stuff. They have magic links via email. They have one-time passcodes. They have WebAuthn, which is like a JavaScript standard. Like if you've ever used a YubiKey or a fingerprint reader to like log into a website, that's WebAuthn. They've got crypto wallets, if that's your thing. They've got a bunch of different offerings. Basically, if you can think of a way to authenticate, they're either probably already working on it, have done it, or will work on it in the future. And since you've integrated with one platform, adding new platforms is actually really fast with Stytch. So if you've done OAuth with one entity, so let's say Google, and you wanted to instead do it with Microsoft or Facebook, adding that in is really, really simple. And you get to keep all of your users too. So if you wanted to switch from OAuth to something else, you still got the same user list. I decided to go with magic links. If it's good enough for Cometeer, it's good enough for me. There's no passwords, I'm not storing any data, and it's just an ephemeral link that lives in an email inside of your inbox, so it's as secure as your inbox is. Honestly, if your inbox is compromised, you probably got more things to worry about than someone posting that same video of the panda mom being spooked because her baby sneezed on your behalf. First things first, the tech. So for the back end, I'm running NodeJS with Express.js, which is one of the most well-known, easiest REST API libraries. And because I'm not dealing with a bunch of data, I don't know how many people are going to be using this, I'm just leaving stuff in memories. Woo! So no database integrations for me. The front end's going to be good old classic HTML, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript. Now, I know what you're asking. Would this have looked better if I had done React or Vue or Angular or Backbone or whatever JavaScript framework for front end that you can think of? Yeah, probably, but you know, this is like a fun little project. We're just playing it loosey-goosey. Hey, I know JavaScript, it's fine. I don't need to know how to display stuff and round corners on buttons or whatever. Okay, listen, I don't know any of those frameworks. I'm not a front-end engineer, I'm just a back-end engineer, so buckle up, because things are about to get a little messy. I picked Stytch's JavaScript SDK because it was really, really easy to just drop it into my currently existing application, and it looks good. In fact, it's probably the best-looking part of this application. You'll see. Dropping in was really easy and getting it working was fine, but I hit a snag almost immediately, which was the example code included saving a bunch of stuff to the session, right? So you want to authenticate someone, you want to put their token in their session, and you want to have that token passed back to you. I forgot that Express.js just doesn't have sessions. So for a good half an hour, I was just bungling my way through. Why doesn't this variable exist? I'm confused. And then I realized, oh, I just let me just install Express Session and put that in, and then everything worked. Everything was fine. Okay, well, everything was fine on the everything was fine on the back end. I decided to use Java's built-in fetch API because XHR requests are kind of a pain, and honestly, it's not 2012 anymore, so let's all get with the times, Grandpa. The thing that tripped me up is that fetch doesn't actually send credentials by default, which session variables count as credentials. So it's not sending those by default. I was very confused whenever I would get requests on my backend and just nothing was bundled, right? I set the variable, why isn't it here? And I was ready to blame Fetch for this. I said, why aren't you including the credentials? It turns out there's a credentials field. And then I got mad at Fetch again. I said, oh, why your newfangled kids and your security? And it turns out XHR has the same thing. Basically, if they're not making a request to the same source, the same origin, then it just won't include the credentials, which makes sense and is secure, but my front end and my back end are going to be hosted in 2 different places. They were locally too, right? Node spins up on whatever port you tell it to, and I was using the Python simple HTTP server, which spins up by default on port 8000, so different ports. Basically, everything was conspiring against me to not send these credentials to the back end. But once I figured that out, it was really, really simple to change, and then that was it. I was off to the races. Everything from that point on was a breeze. I wrote a little bit of middleware to where as soon as a request came in on a group of endpoints, I would grab the session token out, send it off to Stytch, and get their user ID back, bundle that back up with the request, and send it on down. Which is exactly what we want. Any unauthenticated request would get 403 and kick right back out. And the front end would redirect them to the front page and say, go re-authenticate yourself. So by the time any of my endpoints were hit, I had a reliable user ID from Stytch that I could use to do any amount of deduping. In fact, if you take a look at the code, that's the first thing I do on any post endpoint. It's basically, have you done this action before? Have you submitted a recommendation? Have you +1? Or have you created your own community before? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, I say, get that out of here. You can't be doing that. After that, it's just gets, so I just return the stuff that you asked for, sprinkle in a little bit of some interval timing to make sure that communities only live for as long as the server defines. So that is a bit of a caveat, like if you create a new community, it'll only be alive for like an hour, which to me is kind of a feature that means that like we're keeping things concise, we're deleting the data whenever we're done. I don't keep track of it, you're not keeping track of it, let's not keep track of it. It's all in memory. We're basically playing Calvin ball at this point. The front end is a bit more chaotic. I'm a back-end engineer, and I haven't done as much front end as I probably should have in my career. In fact, of the 3 large pillars that I see in programming, being back-end, front end, and data science, I basically know back end. If you asked me to do any amount of data rendering inside Python, I would maybe cry. So let's go over this front end briefly. Right, the communities page, you get in, it fetches the communities that you're currently a part of, and if you have already created a community, then it will gray out a button in the top right to create your own. But if you haven't created one, you click that button, a modal pops up, right? Modal, which I took from a Dev2 post. I'll link that in the description so you can check it out. Great modal, I really like the code. Pretty easy to work with as well. So I display that, and then as soon as you hit submit and it goes to the back end and it creates a new community, you get a link which you can share with everybody. There's also a little copy button on there that I got from Icons 8, which looks really good. Again, all of the things that look really good about this front end, I didn't do when I grabbed from other places. Recommendations look really similar. I basically do a fetch on the back end for the recommendations. They are already sorted by what has the most +1, so I just display a bunch of squares that have like the link and a background image that's associated with them, so you can click on them and go to a different link. There's +1 buttons on all of them that I did myself in trusty old paint.net. Paint.net, not paint. Paint.net. It's different. Each community can have filters on what they want for their recommendations. So whenever you post to a recommendation, if it's not in the format that they're looking for, YouTube video, images, something along those lines, then we kick it back. The backend will just say, get that garbage out of here. I don't want that. And then you'll be able to submit again if you want. The result's a really simple tool that anyone can use to solicit suggestions from their chat. Because +1s bring things up to the top, as you refresh the page, the things toward the top of the page are higher and higher quality, or I guess more accurately, the chat think you should look at these things more, whatever that means. Pretty easy. It's an easy tool to use, and everything gets deleted automatically, so I think it's kind of nice. So this project is really simple. It only consists of a small backend to be able to dedupe users and store data, return it back to the front end, a front end to be able to store that data, and auth in order to allow the backend to do its job. And for once, actually, the auth part wasn't the hardest part of this project. It was the front end. I've talked enough about that. Stytch made it really easy to lower the barrier of entry into my tool on behalf of audiences, but also on my part, it gives me a consistent way of determining who is who so that I can figure out if you've already done something or not. Gotta filter out the cruft, get them ruffians out of here. Now I've just got to build an algorithm to automatically determine video quality so I'm not getting the same 4 memes submitted every time I use this tool. As always, the code for this project is on my GitHub, github.com/codingvibe. There's also going to be a link in the description. You could follow me on Twitch. I stream there 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 9 p.m. Central. And you follow me on Twitter for notifications on when I go live or just cool things that I find. So I will see you there. Thanks for watching. See you next time.